Hello, everyone. I believe we are live. Welcome to Understanding. I'm Craig Biddle, and today we're going to do another live episode. This should be streaming on YouTube, X, and Facebook. So hopefully you're tuning in from wherever you prefer. Um, Before we get started, for people who have not, who didn't attend the first episode of this live Q&A, this is just a casual show where occasionally I'll have a few things to say up front about some topic that's on my mind that I'm interested in talking about. And then we'll take a Q&A, which is pretty broad, anything involving morality, objectivity, or thinking in principles. That's sort of the three-part theme of the show. I'm not very interested in politics. It's not my thing, not my field. I don't pay attention to it. If you have a question about politics, you're welcome to ask one. But I'm likely to just say, I'm not tracking what's going on in politics that much. It's not that I don't track anything, but I don't track enough of it to want to talk and make a show about politics. It's just not my thing. So when we get to the Q&A, feel free to ask questions pretty much about anything, especially regarding morality, objectivity, and how to think and apply principles in life, in particular for living and loving life, also to some extent for defending liberty. And there's some segue there to politics that, and I'll certainly address things, at least in the abstract there. If you've got a question, you can click the link that is in the comment stream on whatever program you're using, and that will take you to a waiting room where Jackson Upman, who's working with me here, will take your name and test your microphone and stuff like that. And then you'll get in a queue to come on to the show and discuss things with me live. We want to keep things as simple as possible, and we're using a few technologies right now to make this show work. So bear with us. We had some technical difficulties last week. I anticipate we'll probably have a few more this week still, but we'll get through those in time. Today, to get started, I wanted to just bring up something that's been on my mind a lot because we've been talking about it a lot at OSI. I'm working on an article on this topic, and it's a large portion of a book I'm writing as well. And that topic is the relationship between the use value of ideas and their factual basis. And so I want to explore this a little bit today at the front of the show, and then we can talk about it more if you want to, or we can just open up for questions about other things. Now, what does it mean that the use value, what's the relationship between the use value of ideas and their factual basis? In certain regards, this is pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. I mean, if we start with the simplest of concepts, say, bird or bus or table, right? Things that, perceptual level concepts. We can say, what's the use value of the concept bird? Why do we need, what facts give rise to the need for that concept? Why do human beings need to form that concept and use the concept? Well, it's pretty straightforward. There are these creatures that have these certain characteristics, and we want to be able to name them and classify them into a conceptual framework so that when we want to refer to them, either in our own thinking or in conversation or in writing, we can do so. And this is the basic purpose of a concept. It's to create a mental file folder of sorts for a certain kind of thing in reality, a thing that has a certain kind of characteristic that makes it similar to other things with that same characteristic, and then we can refer to it. And there's a whole lot to be said about how concepts are formed, and that's not the purpose of this show today. If you're interested in that, highly recommend Ayn Rand's book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. But at the basic level, that's what we need concepts for, is to identify things in reality that actually exist. And this is true, whether you're talking about mountains or automobiles or abstractions like humor or sarcasm or justice. Any of these kinds of things, what we're trying to do is identify something real. And we're doing that because we need to use the concept, sarcasm, mountain, justice, morality, whatever, in our thinking and in our communications. And this is what we are. We're a conceptual animal. It's what it means to have the faculty of reason, is that we use concepts, form concepts, put concepts together into sentences and propositions and generalizations and principles and the whole 9 yards. The reason this gets interesting, at least vis-a-vis the, with respect to the subject that I want to talk about today, is that very often people focus on one thing or the other, either the use value of something or looking for a factual basis for something. But very few people see that these two things are just two aspects of the same process, or they're two perspectives on the same fact. And this becomes especially interesting when we get to normative ideas, moral concepts and epistemological concepts, things like truth or certainty or should or shouldn't or ought or purpose, and the like. And so I want to just say a few words about this idea, and I think you'll find this high leverage. So the easiest way to see at least a sort of a controversial relationship between these two things is if you're at all familiar with the way in which the philosopher Ayn Rand grounded morality in reality. She began her inquiry into morality not with the question, oh, which of the moralities out there is the one that I should embrace. No, she stepped back and said, what are values and why does man need them? Or alternatively, what is morality and why does man need it? Now, this question, why do we need this thing, can be looked at from another perspective. If you say, why do we need this thing? You're looking for the facts of reality that support it or give rise to the need for it. But you can ask that question directly. You can say, what facts of reality give rise to the need for this thing? So you can look at it either way. You're either saying, what supports this thing? Means what ties this thing to reality? What undergirds it and ties it to reality? Or what facts of reality give rise to the need for it? But right there in that relationship, you can see a similarity between the factual basis for a given idea and the use value of the idea, why we need the thing. And this came up, I was on a podcast with someone recently, and I mentioned something about not needing the hypothesis of God. And he retorted, well, you're arguing from consequences, in effect. That's a logical fallacy. But it's not a logical fallacy to argue from the need for something. It is wrong to say it's true because I need it. That would be wrong. But it's not true to say the use value of an idea is what's going to point to the facts of reality that give rise to the need of the idea. And if there are no facts that give rise to the need of the idea, be it God or morality or justice or fantabulation, right? You can just come up with any term you want. And either we need the concept, we need this word, it has some referent in reality that serves human purposes, or it doesn't. So the interesting fact here is that just asking a few questions about any given concept helps us to get to the bottom of this issue. And staying in the realm of morality, because that's the area in which I find this most interesting. So if someone says, well, what is the standard of morality? The question is very quickly, well, why do we need a standard of morality? Why do we need to have that thing? And someone would say, well, because that's if we don't have a standard by which we can determine what's good and bad, right and wrong, we're not going to be able to know what's good and bad, right and wrong. You can say, well, why do we need to know what's good and bad, right and wrong? Why does it matter? And if you keep digging in this direction, they're going to say, well, if we don't know what's good or bad, right or wrong, people just can just do whatever they want. Nobody can say, there's anything good or bad about it. These terms don't have any grounding. Say, well, why? What difference does it make whether we have grounding for such terms? And you keep asking this question, and eventually somebody's going to say, well, look, if we don't have any conception of right, wrong, good, bad morality, then people are just going to be attacking each other, doing whatever they want. This is completely inconducive to human life. Bingo. Now we've hit a rock bottom. We've hit a fact of reality, the requirements of human life. We can't live, certainly not as conceptual beings who act on their judgment in order to do the thing that we call living. We can't do that thing unless we have some kind of a code of values and a code of behavior and an integrated system about the ways in which we need to act in order to do that thing, right? And you can look at this for almost any, not almost, literally any normative term. If someone says, as the philosopher G.E. Moore did, you can't define the word good. Good is an indefinable word, just like yellow. You just kind of can point to it and say, I mean that, but you can't really define the term. Well, if you ask the question, well, why do we need the term? What use is the concept good? Or what facts of reality give rise to the need for the concept of good? Because if no facts of reality give rise to the need for it, we can just throw the concept away and stop using it. But as we can kind of sense, if you just threw the concept of good out of your vocabulary and stopped using it, you'd have trouble getting through the day. We need that concept. Why? What facts of reality give rise to the need of it? And if you dig and start asking questions about the nature of this concept and the like, you're going to get to one of Ayn Rand's famous statements, which is that a concept such as value or good presupposes an answer to the question, a more fundamental answer to the question of value to whom and for what, or good to whom and for what purpose. And these terms don't have any meaning unless they are anchored in answers to those questions. And once you get that, then, why do we need the concept good? Because we need to know when things are good to us for what purpose? For living our lives. Again, we get to the foundation of Rand's view of the correct standard of morality, or the foundation of morality, where we find the fact, the rock bottom fact, that the very phenomenon that gives rise to our need for these things is the concept of life, or the fact of life. So I'd like to explore this more, and if you guys want to ask questions about this topic, I'm all about it. You can bring up literally any concept, as long as it's a concept I know something about, and there are plenty of scientific concepts and specialized concepts that are not even in my vocabulary. But if you bring up sort of commonly used concepts and ask yourself, what's the use value of this thing? You'll find that the use value and the factual basis are literally the same thing, just looked at from two different perspectives. And I don't think you're going to find an exception to this, which I think is very interesting. And this gives us a good understanding of the nature of objectivity, the nature of how it is that we keep our concepts, our ideas, connected to reality so that we can use them in reality. And the last thing I'll say on this is really in contrast to ideas such as pragmatism and consequentialism, which essentially focus exclusively on the use value of ideas to the exclusion of any factual basis, like in some of the philosophers who embrace consequentialism or pragmatism, they don't even believe we can access reality, let alone ground our ideas in reality. The idea is, in pragmatism in particular, that the true is just that which works. So what's going to work? What's the use value of a given idea? If you go read Richard Rorty or listen to some of his stuff, he's probably the clearest speaker about this kind of thing. And they just deny that there is any factual basis. There's just use. And then if you go to the sort of Kantian / religious side of the philosophic equation, you get people who could care less about the use value. Kant says if an idea has use value, it's by that fact not in the sphere of morality, because morality isn't about serving our purposes or accomplishing anything that we want to accomplish. It's about doing your duty. It's about following the moral law within, according to Kant, which emanates from the noumenal world, which is akin to a supernatural world. And religion is the same way. If you say, take Abraham and Isaac, the story of Abraham and Isaac from the Bible, what's the use value of a commandment from a supernatural being that says, hey, kill your son to prove your obedience to me? There's no use value in this idea at all. The value to you of this idea is just irrelevant. You're supposed to just obey the commandment because it's a commandment, right? And that's very similar to the Kantian moral, categorical imperative or duty premise. So in this instance, you have a focus on the alleged truth of these ideas, the alleged factual basis. But of course, there's no factual basis for either of these things, because there is no moral law within, there is no noumenal world, there is no God, and there is no supernatural world. But the people who embrace these ideas pretend that there is, and then that's the basis, that's the factual basis for these ideas. And then the consequences, who cares? Be them what they are. And if it means killing your son or telling the Nazis, that Anne Frank is in your attic or whatever, so be it. The consequences don't matter. Once you see that use value and factual basis properly understood are the same thing, you have a whole new way of looking at the world. You have an integrated way of looking at the world, a way of looking at the world where the facts of reality integrate with the requirements of human life, where is and ought are integrated, where fact and value are integrated, where reality and human needs are integrated. And this is a beautiful thing. And this is where hopefully more and more people, or this is the idea that hopefully more and more people will come to understand, because this is really the essence of how we human beings can rise to the level of living fully as human beings. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. This was about almost 20 minutes, and occasionally I will want to do that just to put some ideas on the table. For now, let's go ahead and start taking questions. Jackson, it looks like I have Doug in the waiting room. Is that my first question? All right, let's go ahead and bring Doug in. I didn't hear from Jackson on that. Jackson, I'm not hearing you, by the way, if you are trying to talk to me, but I see Doug here. Hello, Doug.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. Are you hearing me properly?
I am.
Oh, good. Okay. My question relates to a situation that came up when I was called for jury duty. This was when I was living in Los Angeles a number of years ago. And about 100 people from the pool of potential jurors were taken into a courtroom. And we were told by the judge that this was not a trial. It was what the judge called a hearing. The situation was as follows. California has I had not known this at the time. California has a law on the books that says that people who are convicted of sex crimes against children, considered child predators, after they serve their sentence, the state may continue to incarcerate them, and they can only be released by the permission of certain medical and legal professionals. But in order for the state to incarcerate this person, first the state must hold this hearing. So they were going to pick jurors to participate in the hearing. There was a person there who would speak for the state on behalf of incarcerating the person, and there was a lawyer there who would speak for the person who would potentially be incarcerated. As part of the voir dire, the questions that they asked of potential jurors ran to some 7 pages. I said that I felt a certain conflict between the following. On one hand, I did not like the concept of the state incarcerating someone just because they are at risk of committing a crime. They have not actually committed the crime, but they have a high potential for doing so. On the other hand, I said if I was chosen as a juror, I would try to follow the law. And of course, I would listen to the testimony. And they were going to have testimony from experts in psychiatry and psychology and experts on the law also. My question is, it turned out that I was eliminated from the potential jury pool because the person speaking on behalf of the state used one of her peremptory challenges to eliminate me. And so I didn't have to go ahead and be a juror. My question is, how do you handle this situation as someone who considers himself a good citizen and a reasonably strong sense of morality and so on? So I'm curious as to how would you process this situation, assuming that I had been chosen for the jury?
So let me get clear. It sounded at the beginning of your explanation here as though you said that this is a person who's already been incarcerated.
Yes.
He's been found guilty and he's been incarcerated.
Yes, he was found guilty of sex crimes against children. He had served a pretty significant sentence. And now it was time for the state to either reincarcerate him or let him go based on this hearing that was going to be held.
Well, this is where I'm getting a little bit confused, because reincarcerate makes it sound like he's been freed and now they're going to get him and, put him back in jail. Is this just a hearing to determine whether a person who has served some portion of his sentence should get out early or continue the full sentence?
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that. He had served his full sentence for his crimes. But the California law, at least this is based on my analysis of what the judge told us at the time, the law in California says that because of the strong tendency for people who commit sex crimes against children to go ahead and do so again, the state has this law where they can put them in a institution for the criminally insane, and they are apparently examined there and maybe treated and so on. But they can only get out if the people who run that institution say it's okay. Otherwise, they're just going to be in there indefinitely.
So let me just preface anything I say here with, I am no legal expert. Law is a very, very complex area that I know, relatively little about. I can say a lot about what I think are the moral foundations for given laws, which is more the area, that I play in, so to speak. I think that with that said, I think that sexually abusing children is one of the worst crimes imaginable, and that the punishment for that, depending on the kind of sexual abuse, I mean, it's one thing for, a pedophilia to kiss a child on the cheek. It's another thing for pedophilia to rape a child. And then there's everything in between. And it would really depend on so many factors that I don't know here. So is this particular pedophile guilty of raping a child? If so, I don't think he likely should ever get out of jail. Now, again, I don't know what the law is on this. I'm speaking from a moral perspective only. And so if I were in that situation personally, and they said, hey, here's a pedophile who raped a child and he served, 20 years, do you want to, is your opinion that he should get out, or do you think he should stay in jail? I would almost instantly say, I think he should stay in jail for the rest of his life.
We were not told. It was a strange situation because we were told that we were not allowed to know the particular circumstances of his previous crimes unless we were picked for the jury.
Okay.
And I was not picked for the jury, so I can't tell you exactly what he did. And I don't know how many years he had served and so on. I actually, after the fact, after I was excused from jury duty, I tried to track down more information. I assumed that the court proceeding, but I could never find it. So I can't really give you the kinds of details that you're looking for.
Yeah. So your conundrum really was whether so you had some real discomfort with the idea of what they were asking you to do without more information.
In a sense, yes.
Is that sort of where you are? I think what I would do in that situation is say just that. I'm really uncomfortable about the lack of information being provided here when a person's freedom and life to some extent are on the line. And if you want me to make a decision about this, including whether I, would want to be on the jury or anything else, I want more information. And if your conscience tells you that you need more information to make a sound decision on this, I think that's the very thing to say.
Okay.
And I'm with you. Like, I would never want to wade into some kind of a legal setting or a hearing or any place where what I say and think is going to affect positively or negatively somebody's life, if I feel like I'm really not being given the kind of information that they ought to give me. Another way of saying this is, we have every epistemological right to doubt the validity of a given legal process. And if the process looks bad enough to us, we have every right to say, I'm not going to engage in that process. It's too far outside of what I think makes rational sense. So I won't do it. And I think this is the same for something like, if I was called to jury duty and I found out that someone was arrested for smoking marijuana or doing some drug or whatever. And, and part of my job as a jurist was to decide whether he was innocent or guilty so that he could be punished by the law if he was guilty. I would just say flat out, I am not putting someone in jail ever for using marijuana. I'm just not going to do it. So if you want to put me on the jury, I'll tell you in advance what I'm going to say. He's innocent, and I don't care what your laws say. I'm not going to be a part of that. And I like that. I wish more people would take that attitude of, I will not participate in something that I think is wrong.
Many of the people who dropped out, the judge made it clear that if anybody was uncomfortable with the prospect of participating, they could have a personal session with the judge. And the judge mentioned, if there was any family history of sexual abuse and so on. And I'm thinking that the rough estimate of the 100 people who were there, probably at least 25 opted to take that option. Now, I don't know what went on because it was a private session with the judge outside the courtroom, but
yeah, that sounds like a good process to me, though. Like that sounds like the court had a system at hand to enable people to have that kind of a conversation with the judge. I'm a little bit surprised that a judge would extend that much time to that many prospects.
We were there for I don't mean to interrupt, but we were there for picking the jury. We were there for a full week, Monday through Friday, plus 2 days following. And I was one of the last to go. I think they wanted 12 jurors and 6 alternates. And I think we had a total of 15 people had been picked. And they finally decided to eliminate me. They excused me. So I didn't get to find out exactly how it turned out.
Well, listen, Doug, thank you for your call and your very interesting question. I'm sorry I was not this is a little bit outside of my area of expertise, so I don't have a whole lot to say about it. But I will say this, just in closing, It sounds to me like the court really did have a reasonable system set up there for dealing with this. There may be more to it that was wrong. I don't know, but it's quite often that when I hear about how the U.S. legal system works or various state legal systems work, there's a lot of good in them still, and difficult cases are, you know, we as lay people go into a courtroom setting and we can pick on the way that things are done, but you just imagine all the legal minds that have come together over many centuries to try to figure out what's the best way to handle these kinds of things. And very often what they've come to is a good system. It may not be a perfect system, and there's almost always room for improvement. But this particular instance doesn't sound like a very bad. It sounds like the person who did the bad thing is very bad, but it sounds like the system and their effort to deal with it was pretty good.
I had that impression too, just the time I was there. Really, for me, it stuck with me because it seemed to create a sort of moral, I won't call it turmoil, but a little bit of moral confusion inside of me because I was going to have to face, as I say, this choice of follow the law versus, I don't think it's right for the government to put somebody in jail for a crime they're about to commit. There's actually a movie called Minority Report that
Oh
deals
yeah,
with
yeah. That was coming to mind too when you were talking about this.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah. But I have heard, and I don't know the statistics on this, but I have heard that it is true that people that pedophiles do have a very high tendency to recommit that crime. Apparently it's a very emotionally driven crime that they have a lot of trouble shaking the desire, whatever this wretched desire is that they have. It's there, and apparently it just doesn't go away. And so letting them out can, I think, be really dangerous. And again, in my view, if somebody rapes a child, that's it. I think you lock them up, throw away the key, and, if they're convicted of that, and that's it. So I would never advocate anything else, at least in that kind of an extreme situation.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and come back again. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Okay.
Take care. All right. Who else do we have? Do we have someone in the waiting room, Jackson, or should I go to?
Yeah, we do. Questions? We do have one. I'll add him to the stage right now.
Okay.
All right. I believe his name in the chat is Adversary. You're live.
Adversary. Okay. I have an adversary. Hello, Adversary. I can't see you, but are you hearing me?
Can you hear us?
Sorry. Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good.
Because I couldn't see you, I've taken you off the screen. So
if you would like to see me, I can turn on my camera.
No, that's fine. We can just go with audio for now. What's your question today?
So I'm going back to college, and I would like some advice on dealing with modern philosophy in college. Modern academics. I dealt with it quite a bit throughout 2016 up to 2019. I'm only one class short of my 180 credits required to complete. And
is this a philosophy degree?
It is a philosophy degree. It's a multidisciplinary philosophy degree because my college didn't. It's philosophy, politics, economics. That's the whole deal. But I focused intensely on philosophy.
What do you want to do with the degree and for a career?
Well, originally I took up a second major because I completed pretty much all my requirements really quickly. In high school, I took AP classes and I passed about 5 of them, and I got college credit for 5 courses when I was only a child. And then from here, I ended up taking 2 majors, the philosophy major and then the second major, which was grant writing.
Hmm.
And that was my idea of how I would recover from perhaps, losing money on an arts degree. As I found out after I took an arts degree, like you end up
Baked in
losing money.
insurance. Yeah.
Right.
Well, again, let me reiterate the question that I mentioned before. What is it you're interested in doing as a career? Do you want a career in philosophy at all?
I mean, I would love a career in philosophy. I'm deeply interested in objectivist philosophy specifically. That's what got me interested in the first place as a child. And
So then your question is, what is my advice on dealing with modern philosophy?
yeah, how do I not become like the primo facie enemy of the class
Yeah, yeah.
when I'm trying to speak up or whatever, or trying to answer questions and such in class?
Yeah. I avoided academia like a plague. I just never wanted anything to do with it. So I'm not going to speak from firsthand experience of what to do in that kind of setting. I just couldn't I couldn't bear that.
Okay.
But I can say this: if I were in a philosophy program today and there was a bunch of nonsense going on, hopefully it's not all nonsense. I mean, I don't know the extent to which you're dealing with nonsense there. I would probably very frequently use the phrase, that doesn't make sense to me.
I
I would
have
just
used that phrase.
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
that's your friend, that phrase. If people
Just
say
to
something
me,
and they go, what,
right?
and it doesn't make any sense, you just go, okay, I heard that and I read the article or I heard the argument, but it doesn't make sense to me. And then if they ask you, well, why? You say, well, and this goes to the sort of thing I said at the start of this show today. Um, Ideas, particularly philosophic ideas, should have use value. If they're of no use, if they don't help us in life, and that means for thinking or acting, and ultimately thinking, because all of our actions are guided by our thinking. So if the
Hmm.
ideas are not in some way going to help us understand reality and our needs in this world so that we can live, act and live well, then I would always say, well, I don't understand why anyone would study these ideas when they have no use value. So I'd say a lot about use value. And then I'd also say, and if an idea is going to have use value, if it's going to be something that I can use to live, then it must have some kind of a factual basis. There must be certain facts that give rise to my need of the idea. And those kinds of questions that help you maintain at least a personal insistence on the connection between the ideas and reality and between the factual basis and the use value going in both directions, that will keep you sane, I think, or it would go a long way to keeping you sane. um, I don't think you have to get nasty with people who disagree with you about this stuff, or with academics who want to talk about pie in the sky stuff, or that doesn't make any difference. I think you can very politely just say, yeah, I understand you guys like to talk about that. I don't understand the use value or the factual basis for any of that. So I just don't get it. Now, if I need to write something about this, if I need to deliver a paper about this, then I will. But part of the paper is going to be, I heard, so and so, Habermas says this, and I'm being asked to comment on it, and I think it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he's focusing on this. I don't know why he wrote a whole book about this. He seems not to understand that we live in a world that we perceive, and that we can take these ideas and conceptualize them and put them into action so that we can live. And I would make that a part of my critique or my paper if I had to write a paper about something
Right.
like that. Does this ring a bell? Is this anything along the lines of what you're doing?
I believe so. And like, if you would indulge me in telling you a quick story.
Sure.
Um, so my college had a club called the Philosophy Roundtable. It was led by Amos Nascimento. He's an internationally famous philosopher living. And he brought in this other philosopher who talked a lot about cosmology. And we went to the bar, of course, and we all had our drinks, and we were all talking and chatting. And I was just the youngest of the group, for sure. I was about, well, obviously 21 at the time. I think I was bridging on 22. Um, and I brought up about how bizarrely similar our guest's cosmology is to Ayn Rand's cosmology. In that, if you'll indulge me, that Ayn Rand didn't really have much of a cosmology. That if you read her nonfiction, she will tell you that like the universe never really began to exist, that it just is. That the universe, it's been so many years since I've read it. However,
And so how did they react to this? You were identifying that something that one of these philosophers was saying was similar to Rand's view on that. Is that what I heard?
yes, absolutely. And they were
And
getting all sorts of credit academically for these insights. And I was kind of pointing out, I was like, well, Ayn Rand also had these insights, and your insights are spookily similar. And honestly, I should write a paper on this and should write more on this, but like there, like we know, Ayn Rand's works are continual bestsellers. And we know that we're in a culture of thieves.
well, Rand, in my understanding, was not the first person to identify the idea that the universe is eternal. I
Oh,
think
okay.
several philosophers in ancient Greece, arguably Aristotle, although Aristotle held there was a prime mover that started the motion of the universe, or motion of things in the universe. I believe he held that the universe was eternal, that things just had always existed.
Hmm.
And so I'm not, Rand definitely held that, but she's not the only person to have held that idea. Um, so it doesn't sound to me like necessarily anyone was using her idea there improperly. But I think you're
Okay.
right. Rand really didn't. In fact, Rand said explicitly she thought cosmology needed to be separated from philosophy, that they were just different
I
subjects.
believe
And
the specifics were her insights on what a world means, what Earth means, what nature means. And it was in those like kind of complexities that this philosopher also had ideas about world and nature and such.
so those are, again, these are very, very common concepts in the history of philosophy.
Right.
And lots of people have had reasonably good views on them. The thing that Rand did that was super high leverage in these areas is identify as axiomatic certain concepts like existence, consciousness, identity, entity, and several others. And that is where she, that's the at least the foundation of much of her work in terms of what was unique and especially powerful in her work. But look, Rand is not the only person who came up with truths and good ideas in philosophy. Aristotle did a lot of good.
Right.
There are
I do admire Aristotle greatly.
yeah.
Like,
So anyway, it sounds to me like you're in an interesting environment. I think if you want a career in philosophy, I'm all about that. I love to hear young people wanting to take philosophy seriously and engage in it as a profession. I urge you to do just what I said earlier. If you're going to go into this, particularly if you're going to go into it professionally, and that is look for the use value and the factual basis of the ideas and for that integration, because I think this really is the key to objectivity. It's the key to keeping your mind connected to reality and keeping the ideas that you embrace useful in reality. And I think if you do that, and if you help others to do that, you can have a great career in this area, whether you stay in academia or whether you get out and do your own thing.
all right,
So
rock on. Is there a way to download the recording, or is there
this
a
will
recording at all?
Yeah, this is being recorded. It's being live streamed, but it's also going to be up on YouTube after this. So you can definitely get the recording there.
Okay, rock on. Like, yeah, thanks. You've been a great guy. Like, I've had, granted, a very immature view of you because my only view of you was back when I was like 12 years old. And that
Well,
was like something like 13 years ago.
that's interesting. Well,
So,
it's interesting that you've been interested in ideas for that long. If you are interested in my ideas, I urge you, and this may be helpful to you philosophically too,
sure
pick up a
thing.
copy of my book, Loving Life, which
Will do.
is about the morality of self-interest. I think you'll find it useful.
All right,
Thanks,
Craig
adversary.
Biddle, Loving Life. All right, thank you.
Take care. All right.
All right. So, Craig, we have one person in the waiting room. Lewis,
All right.
add him to the stage.
Sounds good.
All right, Lewis. So you're on the stage now. So if you can unmute, we should be able to hear you. Let's see.
I'm neither seeing nor hearing Lewis.
Yeah, his camera and mic are off. Lewis, can you hear us? Can you turn your mic on? So it looks like he's having some issues turning his mic on. So in the meantime, Craig, we can take a question from the chat while Lewis troubleshoots how to get his mic to turn on. So I can go find a question for you.
I think I see one here. Why does Peikoff say proof is reduction in OPAR, but then says that proof is discovery, and then square brackets induction, close square brackets, in the logical leap? What is proof in objectivism, reduction, or induction? So I cannot speak for Leonard Peikoff. He has his ideas, and I've learned a lot from him, but I don't recall every sentence he wrote, and he didn't even write The Logical Leap. That was written by David Harriman. But I can tell you what I think proof is, and I think Peikoff would agree on this. Proof requires both reduction to the perceptual level, ultimately, and cross integration with the network of your observation-based knowledge. So a proof, ultimately, you're demonstrating that something is true by connecting it to reality. And so there's one axis for that connection that's vertical, that connects the abstraction or the generalization or whatever it is, whether it's a concept or a generalization or a principle, that connects it to reality. Here are the facts that connect it to reality, or here are the facts that give rise to it. Take that either way. That's reduction going down from the idea to reality, and induction by looking at the facts of reality that give rise to and support the generalization or the principle or whatever it is. But none of that is really complete. And I believe Peikoff makes this point explicitly in OPAR, although it's been a few years since I've read OPAR. None of that is really complete until you have checked it against the other observation-based knowledge that you possess. And if it integrates non-contradictorily with your other observation-based knowledge, then you have proven it to yourself to be true. And that is the process of proof. So I would never say that proof is just vertical integration or just reduction to reality, if by that it was meant that you didn't have to do anything else, that you didn't have to check it against the broader network of your knowledge. I think you always need to do that. And the reason, it kind of depends on the level of the abstraction. If you're dealing with an extremely abstract subject, to take the concept of individual rights, right? So this is super high level abstraction. You can't even get your head around it unless you have a whole lot of knowledge about morality, a whole lot of knowledge about human nature, a fair degree of knowledge about government, history, the whole lot of things you have to know. And so you can hear someone, and I could even do it. I could do it in probably 10 minutes. I'm not going to take the 10 minutes now, but I could give you a sort of a vertical integration or a vertical grounding of that concept by pointing out certain facts. Human beings are a certain kind of being, and we actually live by using our minds and then acting on that judgment. And one of the things that can stop us from acting on our judgment, and it's the only thing that other people can do that can stop us from acting on our judgment, is by initiating physical force against us, which stops us from acting as our judgment dictates, and so on and so forth, right? I could start this series of explanations, and I could give you some examples, and probably within 10, 15 minutes, I could make a very strong case for why the concept of individual rights means that each individual should be free to act on his own judgment for his own purposes, so that he can live fully as a human being, or something to that effect. But if you heard that from me in 10 or 15 minutes, even with really solid examples, I don't think you would be justified in saying, oh, I'm done, I've got it. Biddle just proved to me that individual rights means what he just said. I think the onus would still be on you as an independent thinker to say that. You could say to yourself, that really seems to make sense to me. I can see how those ideas had this hierarchical structure and grounded in a fact about human nature. And so I'm fascinated by this, but I think your next step, and I suspect it would be your next step, would be, I'm going to think about this more and test it against other ideas. I'm going to try to attack this idea from different angles and perspectives. And then if you did that over the course of, a few weeks or a month or two, I think you would be able to prove to yourself that this is what rights are, and these are the facts that give rise to the need of the concept and all of that. So there's an example right there that I think you can work with to see why the vertical connection or the reduction to reality is a necessary feature or aspect of proof, but it's not a sufficient aspect of proof, at least not for very high level concepts. Does that make sense? Oh, this was a written question, so there's not going to be an answer there. I hope that helps to clear that up. See if I can write this. This was written by Virtue Man 1. So good question. And again, I'm not speaking for Peikoff, but I highly recommend his book, Objectivism: The Philosophy of Ayn Rand. I learned an enormous amount from that book. And my understanding or my recollection is that his view on proof in there, even if he does have a sentence that says something to the effect that proof is reduction to, perceptual reality, I don't think he would say that's all it is. I think he would mean that it's that, and then requires also integration with your other observation-based knowledge. All right. Chances are it's closer to, that's not a question. So you claim that OPAR is wrong on its claim of what constitutes proof of an idea then. What should I do if I were to disagree with something that Peikoff wrote or said? That's not Virtue Man 1. That's not how philosophy is done, just for the record. If I disagree with Peikoff about something, that will be the case. I don't think I disagree with him here, actually. I think you're misreading what he wrote there. But take it either way. If he, in that book, and I don't think he does, says that all that's necessary for proof is reduction to reality, and you do not in any way have to cross integrate that with any of your other knowledge, then I would say, yes, I disagree with Peikoff about that. If, on the other hand, you are misreading this, and I think that he may have a sentence that sounds like he's saying that, but that in the broader context, or if you bring the broader context to bear on this, you will understand that that is not what he is saying, then I think I'm probably in agreement with him. Either way, I don't care. And that's the important point there. I don't worry about who I disagree with and agree with on philosophy. I worry about what makes sense to me. And I think you should do the same. And I'll recommend an article I wrote that you might enjoy on this subject. It's titled Ayn Rand Said is Not an Argument. And you can find that at the Objective Standard Journal. All right, Virtue Man, let's see. I'm trying to see if there are other questions here. Jackson, do we have anyone else in the waiting room? I'm trying to find another question. There's a long conversation going on in the thread here, but I can't find a question right now. So let's see if I can find one. Does such a thing even happen in the leftist California today? Now I hear somebody saying, can you hear Craig? Are there problems? I wonder if you guys are hearing me.
Greg, you're fine now. Luis, I just was talking to Luis. He's coming back to see if he can get his audio to work on the StreamYard again.
All right, I found a question here that I'm going to read and answer, and this is from RIR Dan or Rear Dan 9342. Hey, Craig, am I correct in thinking that there's no instance in wartime in which any rights may be abridged, or is there a use case for this in times of dire external threat, i.e., and then the IE is not followed. Oh, I see. It's a few comments down. Drafts in face of a genocidal enemy, assuming it's needed. Okay. So my view on rights during a time of war is that if an aggressor, so if an aggressor nation or entity, such as Hamas, doesn't have to be a nation, it can be a gang, attacks a country, just out of the blue, just an innocent country, innocent people, and starts killing them, that the attackers, the aggressors, lose all rights immediately. They now have the same amount of rights that a wild eggplant has, namely none. So that's the first thing I would say there. Once you attack, once you initiate force against free people, you have decided to forego your rights fully, and therefore you don't have any. Now, if the country that's been attacked, in trying to eliminate this threat, kills innocent people in the process, then those innocent people are murdered by the aggressor. Why? Because the aggressor necessitated the use of retaliatory force. The aggressor is fully responsible for all death and all destruction that follows from the innocent nation trying to defend itself. Now, this does not mean that an innocent nation, once attacked, can unleash force, with reckless abandon, in the sense that you just go kill everybody, including all the children and women in an area, when you don't need to do that to eliminate the actual threat. So I'll give you just a concrete example here that I think is the case. I don't think, I'll start with the statement of the positive. I regard the Iranian regime as an enemy of the United States. I think it's been an enemy since 1979. When it took over the U.S. embassy, and we never did anything about it, and it held a bunch of people hostage for something like 400 days. And we have, in effect, been in de facto war with Iran ever since. We haven't acknowledged it, but we have been. I think we should eliminate that regime immediately. Still, to this day, I think we should do it tonight. And if we can't do it tonight, we should do it in the morning. And the way that you do that is you don't have to go kill everybody in Iran. That would be absurd. And if we were to try it that way, then that would be shame on us for killing a bunch of people who are innocent and don't need to be killed in order to end this threat. But what we should do is identify the homes, the locations, and whatever else is necessary of every single major state figure in Iran, everyone who is aiding and abetting the process of that regime staying in power. We should eliminate all of their homes, all of their state buildings where these people may be. And I think we should take out all of the training grounds for jihadists. And these are basically what they call madrasas, which are schools that teach Islam, and teach Islam as a religion that needs to be spread by force. And I think we should destroy all of them from high altitude and long distance and be done with it. Then, if some innocent people are killed in that process, when that's what we're targeting, are the actual heads of state and the buildings and homes of heads of state and so on. Let's say a head of state has a 2-year-old child in his house, and the bomb hits the house to kill the head of state, this essentially jihadist, and his child dies. Who killed the child? The Islamic regime in Iran killed the child by necessitating this retaliatory force. So I don't think that the good guys ever violate rights or should violate rights. I mean, you could violate rights, but then you're being a bad guy. You don't need to do that. When people die in those kinds of processes, the killer is not the person using retaliatory force. It's the person who initiated force and thus necessitated that retaliation. So it's a complex issue, but I think that's, in my view, the best way to think about it. Now, like as I was saying to adversary earlier in this discussion, it was someone else who had asked a question about reduction. Don't just take my word for it. I give you what sounds like a reasonable explanation here, or at least I think sounds like a reasonable explanation. And that's not the end of your thought process on this, right? It should be mull that over, think about it, read an article or two on it. I've written several articles on foreign policy that involve this. One of them is titled U.S. Foreign Policy, What's the Purpose? Another one is titled 10 Steps to End the Jihad Against the West, I think is the name of it. And you'll find that in these and several other articles I've written, I make this point in one way or another, that the person who is responsible for death and destruction is always the entity, not the person, but the entity or the government or the regime or the gang or whatever, who's responsible is the one who initiated the force and required retaliation. So think about that. See if you can come up with an argument against it in your mind, like, whoa, that wouldn't be the case, and work with it, because it's always a good idea to challenge any idea you hear, especially a controversial idea like this. And we're talking about very controversial ideas because we're talking about killing people. So really, really take that seriously. And one of the things I want to do on this show is encourage this kind of thought, both extrospection, look out, see whether this makes sense in the external world, look in, does this integrate with your other knowledge, or do you see a logical process that supports this, that's based on evidence? All those kinds of questions are important. So I encourage that, but that's a medium length answer to a very good question. All right, it looks like Lewis is back in the waiting room. Jackson, are we in communication with Lewis? All right, I'm not hearing Jackson or Lewis. I'm going to click on Lewis and see if I can get him in here. And
Hi,
Lewis,
Craig.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
I can. Wonderful. Let's see if your camera is working. I might be able to see you too. I'm not oh, there. Now I'm seeing you. Good to see you, Lewis. It's been a while.
And hi, it's been a while and nice to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks for joining the show today. What's your question?
Well, basically, it's a question that I have had and I haven't been able to understand basically myself. I think I asked you this question once, but for me it was not that clear. How would you say that we can live spirituality based on objectivist values?
How would I say we can, did you say live spiritually?
Is spirituality?
Got it. Got it. So what's the relationship of spirituality and rational philosophy?
Yeah.
Well, a really good place to start with this kind of question is to look at what objectivism in particular holds as the three cardinal values. What are the three most important values according to this very secular philosophy, objectivism? They are reason, purpose, and self-esteem. Now, what do these three values have in common? They are all spiritual values. You can't touch reason or purpose or self-esteem. You can't see them. They're spiritual. These are ideas. These are aspects of consciousness. Yet here they are at the very base of this completely secular philosophy. And so that's an interesting note. And it's a good place to start with this, because what Rand is doing when she's looking at the world and at human beings is she's asking herself the kinds of questions that we've been talking about in this very episode. What is, do we need this thing? If so, why? What facts of reality give rise to the need of it? And one of the things with human beings, just broadly speaking, that Rand does is she looks at us and says, in effect, what is this thing? What is a human being? What differentiates us from other animals? What are our fundamental characteristics? And if you ask that question and take it seriously and do the thinking on it, you arrive at the same conclusion that Aristotle did, 2,500 years ago, that we are a rational animal, meaning that the thing that really differentiates us from other animals is that we have this rational faculty, which is this insanely powerful faculty that enables us to form concepts and to make abstractions and principles and to think and to plan and to build and to create. We're just freaks of nature in a sense because of this one faculty, reason. But reason doesn't come alone in this animal. We also have an emotional faculty, which is really rich. We have purposes. We can set plans, long range goals and reasons for doing things. We have a concept to denote that. That's called purpose. We have a soul that needs to have confidence about its ability to deal with the world and its feeling of worthiness, of success in the world. So this is self-confidence and self-respect. And Ayn Rand puts those together, and that's where you get self-esteem. That's two aspects of self-esteem. And so she's very focused on, and I think all rational philosophers should be very focused on, these important spiritual things about human beings. Our rational faculty, our emotional faculty, our purposes, our self-esteem, the feelings we get from friendship, love, all of these things are spiritual, but they're not from another dimension.
Mhm.
They're from right here in reality. They're completely natural. They're an aspect of what it means to be a human being. So as you build your thinking about what human beings are and what kind of ideas should we live by and how can we fit these ideas together into a system of ideas that we can use to guide our thinking and our acting so that we can live beautiful lives, you start to arrive at a lot of conclusions about things that are good for us and how we can get those things. Love turns out is a really important thing for human beings. We have this need for bonding with other people. I mean, specifically romantic love here. Thrills and humor are very important to human beings. The spiritual value we get from art. I don't know about you, but I love movies and television series and music. And when I engage in those, I get enormously powerful feelings of awe, admiration, joy, whatever. Sometimes anger. They're not all positive emotions all the time, right? And so here's a basis for, these are just observations of the way that we are factually as human beings and aspects of our life that definitely are not physical things. These are non-physical aspects of our existence. They're real. We know they're real because we experience them and we use them all the time. Reason, purpose, self-esteem, humor, etc. And so that's the basis for it all, really. Now, there's a whole lot to say on secular spirituality, and I'm happy to say I've got an article on this titled Reclaiming Spirituality for Lovers of Life. So I encourage you to read that. You can find that at the Objective Standard. But I'm also really happy to say that a friend of mine, Carrie Ann Biondi, professor of philosophy, is writing a book right now on secular spirituality. And I have not seen any of the manuscript, but I know Carrie Ann, and I know that this book will be phenomenally good. She's taught courses at Objective Standard Institute on secular spirituality. She and I have had many discussions about it and have talked about it, at length. And I know she's got her head around a lot of really good material for this. So keep an eye on her and that book, which I believe is going to be coming out. Well, actually, I don't know. I know she was planning on finishing it this year. Whether it can be published that quickly, I don't know, because I think she's going for a major publisher. But anyway, does that help some? And do you have any follow-up questions on spirituality? It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, and thank you very much for the insights too, and for the suggestions. I wanted to just to like trying to make up my mind. Would it be like some like good habit to check your premises daily after you finish and check if you're really pursuing life, and check your emotions, like how you went through this day and how rational you were, if you're really like pursuing the real life that you deserve in your own standards. Do you think this could be like a way to live spirituality, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you're talking about here is an examined life. It's like taking your life seriously. You want to, to live a beautiful life, you've got to decide what that life is going to look like. You have to get your values in order. And I've written a lengthy article about this titled, I think it's called Value Hierarchies and Happiness. Purpose, Value Hierarchies and Happiness is the name of that article. And it talks about how to think through the important aspects of your life, your work, your recreational activities, relationships, romance and friendship, all the things that really matter to your life. Get them in some kind of an organized format on paper or pixels, whatever you use, and think through what are you going to allocate your major creative time to, and how are you going to spend your recreational time, and with whom are you going to be friends, and why. Life is so precious, and every moment that passes is gone forever, right? And if so, you don't want to waste a moment of this beautiful thing we call life. And you will waste it if you don't have a plan, right? So you basically, you want you can think of it almost as a business plan for your life. What matters to you? How much time are you going to put into various things? Who are you going to spend your time with? What are your long-term goals? What are your short-term goals? What are your health goals? What are your finance goals? All of that stuff needs to be taken into account. And that's just the planning and sort of existential action part of it. You also mentioned checking your premises and asking whether whether you're acting on emotions or whether you're acting on reason. This is introspection, and this is another crucially important aspect of living as a human being. You have to pay attention to what you're doing in your mind, because if you don't, you don't know whether you're acting on emotion or whether you're acting on reason or whether you're acting on principle or whether you're acting on the expedience of the moment. You have to pay attention to see what you're doing. And so that, introspection is an enormously important part of it too. And you mentioned, asking the question, should I be checking my premises? Yeah, always check your premises. What facts, what am I assuming is true in order to make these decisions in life, right? Those are your premises. Your premises are your deeper ideas that you're operating off of. Now, one of the great things about a rational philosophy is once you do the thinking and get your head around a rational philosophy, you don't have to re-ask questions such as, is reason really my means of knowledge? You get to a point, reason is your means of knowledge. You don't have to check that premise again. But you do want to check the premises. Like, if someone tells you, I was just saying in an answer to somebody else's question that, proof does not involve only vertical integration down to the reality, but also cross integration with your other ideas. Well, he shouldn't just either take my word for that or stick with his premise that he's already got about that no matter what. That's a really good time for him to check his premise. Is it true that you could prove something merely by connecting it to reality vertically? Or does it make sense to have the broader integration and have that give you a more solid understanding of whether this thing is true? And I think if he checks that premise, he's going to realize that that was a good premise to check, right? And so sometimes we have premises we don't need to. I don't need to ask myself, is A? I don't need to ask myself, does the law of causality hold, right? There are certain things that are fundamental. I know what they mean. I know they're true. I don't check those premises. I use them to check other premises, and you want to be able to do that. But your question is really good, and I think it's a sign of someone wanting to take life seriously. So I admire that you've asked them that way. Look into Carrie Ann's book. I'll have to try, maybe I'll contact her and find out if I can find out when that book is coming out. In the meantime, my short article on secular spirituality is probably a good starting point for that. And do look into my piece on purpose, value hierarchies, and happiness. And mostly keep thinking about this, like keep asking these questions, discuss these ideas with your buddies, sit down and do the work to get your values organized, and keep doing this thing called thinking for living. That's, by the way, that's a title of a friend of mine's book, Thomas Walker Worth, who, by the way, his book, Thinking for Living, is, it's titled Reason for Living. I stand corrected. Anyway, he's got a really good section in there on organizing your values. So that's another book you can look at on that if you haven't already got that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Craig. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Louis. Great question. It's good to see you.
Okay.
Take
Take
care,
care.
my friend.
Bye.
right. Jackson,
Okay.
do we have?
Hello. Yeah, we do have one other person right now in the studio. Will. I'm
All
going to add
right.
him to the stage. Okay. Will, you are on the stage with Craig right now. Can you speak to see if your mic is working?
Not hearing Will yet.
Will, are you there? Can you hear us? His mic is on, so he's connected. He may have stepped away for a minute.
All right. I'm going to move to some of the questions in the chat over here.
Okay.
And
I have a
see-
list of the one that's up next.
Oh, okay,
Um,
good. I'll let you do that. It'll be easier than me going through that chat.
Yeah. So the question from the chat, the next one is from Patrick. And he said, or he asked rather, could the bombs dropped on Japan be considered reckless and therefore immoral? I think this was in reference to the war question.
Yeah. No, good question. I don't think so. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine who unfortunately passed away a little over a decade ago, wrote a very long article for the Objective Standard titled "Gifts from Heaven." And the reason it's titled Gifts from Heaven is because that is what some of the Japanese people called the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that may surprise you that they called them gifts from heaven, but they were gifts from heaven because what was going on in imperialist Japan was an enslavement of an entire group of an entire culture. And you had a madman who claimed to be God running the place, this emperor, and you had kamikazes attacking America because they didn't care about their lives. They were willing to die for their emperor god. And we have no reason in the world to put up with this kind of thing. And for all we knew, this was going to continue coming at us, these kamikazes. And, when people don't care if they die, it's like jihadists. They don't care if they die and they just come at you. What do you do about that? You bomb them until they stop or until they're all dead. And we didn't know what was going to happen with the Japanese. Even so, when the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, it wasn't sufficient. A second bomb, they kept warring, and so a second bomb was necessary. And it wasn't until that second bomb was dropped that they threw in the towel and surrendered. So it was an absolute tragedy that it had to be done, but I don't think it was reckless. I think that it was a good thing that we had developed those bombs. I don't know how that war would have gone otherwise. I think it would have been horrific. I think many, many more people would have died had that war continued than the several 100,000 who died because of the bombs. I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but I'm pretty sure it was over 200,000. And so, yeah, I don't think that it was reckless. It's certainly tragic that it had to happen. But the imperialist Japanese are responsible for all of it, for all the death and destruction that is, and not one right was violated by America in dropping those bombs. The rights of every innocent person who was killed, because anyone who was party to the assault on America was not innocent. So they didn't have rights. Kamikaze pilot, if you shoot a kamikaze pilot out of the air, you haven't violated anyone's rights. You haven't, he has no rights at all. But children in Japan and in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, children in those cities were innocent. There's no question about that. Well, who violated their rights? Who took their lives? The imperialist Japan did. Japanese did. So that's again the way that I look at this, and I think it's the correct way to look at it. And I encourage you to read the article by John David Lewis, which is the one I mentioned. It's titled "Gifts from Heaven." John David Lewis also has a book titled Nothing Less Than Victory, where if you're interested in this kind of thinking about warfare, he's probably the best who's ever lived on this subject. This book is amazing. It's several articles that were initially published in the Objective Standard, but then converted to chapters in this book. And he gets into Sherman's march during the Civil War and several other wars and very controversial aspects of wars. And he spells out the facts of the war and how they were ended and why they were ended and who's responsible for them and why that's the person that's the entity or the government or the agent that is responsible. And it's really, really clearly stated and I believe very convincing. So I encourage you to take a look at that article and book. Also, John David Lewis published an article on Islam, on Islamic jihad in the Objective Standard, which is also excellent on this same kind of topic. I don't think that particular article made it into the book, but you can get that one at the Objective Standard. I cannot recall the title of that article, unfortunately. But if you search John David Lewis, the Objective Standard, I think his articles will come up. Anyway, that's a good question and very tragic topic, but also an important topic. Here's the thing about all war: we who want to live have every right to do that, and the only way people can live together among each other is by agreeing to certain rules of engagement, certain rules about how we're going to work with each other and what we're going to do with each other and what we're forbidden to do to each other. And this is where rights come in. No one has a right to initiate physical force against another human being. You just don't, because it's contrary to the factual requirements of human life. Like it stops the person from living. And if you do it to a whole nation, then you're stopping the nation from living. And if you enslave a nation or you enslave an individual, then you're stopping the individuals in that nation or the individual you're talking about from living as a human being. And that's why it is morally wrong to do that. And when a nation, state, or a regime initiates physical force against people, whether it's their own people or foreigners, the initiation of force is morally wrong, and it means that immediately that regime and all of the people who are running it lose their rights instantly. Gone. 100% gone. They have no rights. And killing them is no more a rights violation than stomping on an eggplant. Again, the innocents, the children who die in those kinds of campaigns that's tragic, and the rights there are violated, but they're not violated by the retaliator, by the people who are retaliating. They're violated by the people who necessitated that retaliation. So yeah, good question. And again, John David Lewis is the name of the author, and he was a marvelous man and a great writer and a great thinker. So if you read his works, I think they'll be very moving and you'll learn a lot. All right, let's
Okay,
see.
great.
It's 5:30, and I would like to bring this to an end today, unless we have one more. Is there anyone else already in the waiting room, Jackson?
Yeah, so Will's still here. He said he has his mic working now, so we're going to see if we can, if he can ask his question.
Great, and we'll make this
Right.
the last question. If there are other questions in the chat that we didn't get to, we can queue those up for next week's show.
Sure. Okay, Will, you're on the stage right now. Can you try asking your question, see if your mic works? We're not hearing you, Will, if you're asking your question, so I don't think your mic is working. Okay.
All right.
So
A quick note on the technical difficulties here, because listeners are probably frustrated, and Jackson and I are too by that. We are currently using a combined system of StreamYard and Zoom. And we did some research this week, and we found that if with a more advanced package of either of those, we may be able to solve the problems that we're having here. So we're going to be looking into that. I just want to let people know that we're aware that this is not not a sustainable set of problems here. We're not going to keep doing it this way. Thank you for being patient as we're figuring this out. And if anyone in this audience happens to know of a system that can handle call-ins and waiting room and sidebar chats and all of that is not StreamYard or Zoom, because we're already aware of those, drop us a note. We'd love to know about it while we're looking into this. But we'll get all of this squared away in hopefully short order. Should I try bringing Will on one more time here?
we can try once more.
All right, I just clicked add to stage.
All right, Will, you're on the stage again. We cannot hear you if you're speaking.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's take one more from the sidebar there, so we don't end on sheer chaos here.
Sheer technical difficulties. Yeah. So the next question from the chat is from Shelby, and she asks, "Hey Craig, where do you stand on David Harriman's argument that the abandonment of causal induction is leading to scientific stagnation?"
So I haven't read The Logical Leap in several years, and I don't remember his entire argument. But I think that the abandonment of induction, certainly by philosophers, is causing stagnation in philosophy. There's the skepticism in philosophy about whether we can draw generalizations based on observations and have them be sound is overwhelming. It seems to me. I've heard some objectivist academics push back on this, saying, "Oh, there are a bunch of good people in academia." I'm not seeing them. If they're in academia, they're just hiding behind their ivory towers. I'm not seeing much of that at all. And so in my area, and I regard philosophy as a science, so I'm not dodging the question here about the field of science. Induction is not very frequently used. There's a huge amount of skepticism about it, and I think it's a real problem. As for the other sciences, I don't know what's going on in those sciences, but it would seem to me that it would have to be the case that if scientists were actually disregarding, and I don't mean just saying that they're against induction. They would have to be acting as if they're against induction. And I'm not sure how much of that goes on in science, because if you can't get much done if you don't use observation and draw generalizations from observation. You just can't go very far. Now, I know that in physics, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on regarding quantum mechanics and a bunch of claims about what they observe or what they claim to observe or what they claim to be able to infer about what they observe. And I don't know whether these scientists or so-called scientists are using proper inductive techniques, and I don't know whether they advocate or even hold the idea that induction is possible. So I just don't know enough about what's going on in science. But there's no question that if scientists abandon induction, meaning the inductive process, not just that they say, "Oh yeah, I agree with Popper that you can't arrive at true conclusions. You can only falsify things or whatever." it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to stop arriving at conclusions or stop validating your ideas by reference to observation, integration, and logic. So that's, there are claims that scientists and philosophers make, and then there are things they do, and very often they're not the same thing. There's a real lack of integrity, I think, in a lot of people's MOs there. So unfortunately, I can't tell you too much. I think it sounds like I would agree with the statement that you have there from Harriman, if it's true, that scientists are not engaging in induction. But scientific advancements are still being made all the time, at least in tech. I mean, you think about it, just the stuff Elon Musk alone has done in the past couple of decades is astonishing. And this is science. It's science. It's applied technology. So it's not science on the level of discovering new laws of nature, but it is science in the sense that it's applied science. And so that's about all I have to say on that today. I would be interested in at some point in bringing on a physicist to talk about this stuff, because I don't know much about physics. It's a very, very complex subject, and it's way out of my wheelhouse. But maybe we'll think about it. I have a few people in mind, but I don't want to mention anybody because I don't want to do that unless I can confirm that the person would be interested. But we'll do that down the line. We'll try to bring on a physicist and talk about that. So good question. Sorry, I can't give you more of an answer to it than that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. This was fun today. And again, thanks for putting up with the technical issues here. We're going to try a whole new system, I think, by the time we do this again next week. And hopefully we'll knock some of that stuff out. In the meantime, keep using your minds and keep loving your lives. We'll see you next week.